Welcome, everyone. Fact Daddy here, giving it to you raw data, that is. On this episode, Fact Daddy does coronavirus and the Spanish flu. You may have heard people say the coronavirus is the flu. Well, the fact is, it's not the flu, because the flu is the flu. This is coronavirus. But if you're going to compare the two, here's some data to lead you along the way. In regard to the 1918 flu pandemic, it's estimated that about 500 million people, or a third of the world's population, became infected with the virus. And the number of deaths was at least 50 million worldwide, with 675,000 occurring in the United States. Mortality was high among people 5 years old, 20 to 40, and 65 and older. There was no vaccine to fight against the Spanish flu, and people were limited to non-pharmaceutical interventions such as isolation, quarantine, good personal hygiene, use of disinfectants, and limitation of public gatherings. The flu is a virus that attacks the respiratory system. It is highly contagious and can be transmitted when someone coughs, sneezes, or talks. Respiratory droplets are generated and transmitted into the air and can then be inhaled by anyone nearby. Also, if a person touches something with the virus and then they touch their mouth, eyes, or nose, they can also become infected. There were multiple phases of the flu. The first wave came, and those who were sick experienced typical flu symptoms, such as chills, fever, and fatigue, and these people usually recovered after several days. But there was a second, highly contagious wave, which appeared in the fall of the same year. Victims died within hours or days of developing symptoms, with their skin turning blue and their lungs filling with fluid that caused them to suffocate. By the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic came to an end, as those that were infected either died or developed immunity. When it comes to coronavirus, as of now, there are over 5 million cases in the United States, and we're approaching 170,000 deaths, with almost 3 million people recovered. Worldwide, we're looking at almost 21 million cases with 748,000 deaths and almost 14 million people recovered. Now let's take a deeper look and compare the data between the coronavirus and the Spanish flu. The current U.S. population is 328 million people, as compared to the U.S. population in 1918, which was 103 million people. The deaths from the Spanish flu is estimated to be 675,000 people, or 0.65% of the entire population. As stated earlier, the U.S. deaths are 170,000 people so far. With a population of 328 million, the current total of people that have died is 0.05% of the entire U.S. population. In several articles, which I will link below, you can see that the worst case scenario for the coronavirus, it was estimated that a little over 2 million people in the US could die. Doing the math, 2 million people divided by 328 million, which equals 0.61%, which is actually less than that of the Spanish flu. Take into consideration that the Spanish flu numbers, again, were when we were at a time where our health system was not as advanced. Also, the 2 million people estimated to die from the pandemic is a worst case scenario with no mitigation whatsoever. In 1918, there was mitigation taken. Businesses were closed. People wore masks, and still 0.65% of the entire U.S. population died. Looking at the coronavirus and the world population and the current amount of deaths, the world population is 7.8 billion people. The current deaths is 750,000 people, which equals 0.0096% of the entire population. If deaths were to be at 0.65%, which would be the equivalent of the Spanish flu, the world would be looking at 50,700,000 lives lost. The coronavirus has currently infected 21 million people, or 0.269% of the entire population. The Spanish flu infected 500 million people, or a third of the entire population. If the coronavirus was to in fact infect a third of the world population, that would be 2.6 billion people that would need to be infected to equal that of the Spanish flu. In terms of deaths, the Spanish flu killed 20 million to 50 million people. We'll start with the high end. 50 million people, or 10% of those that were infected, died. If we go with the low end of the 20 million estimate, that would be 1.3% of the entire world population died, or 4% of those infected. and comparing the death numbers and the infected numbers, as you can see, the Spanish flu infection numbers are greater than those of COVID-19. I'm not pushing an agenda, I'm just stating facts. The data is given for you to question, for you to comment on, and for you to research. If I've stated anything incorrectly or I misquoted a fact, please let me know in the comments. But also, please be respectful in the way you go about it. As always, respect one another, love one another, and take care of each other, even your enemies. Fact Daddy out.